I found that I could do more to rehabilitate somebody by getting their diet right and switching them to organic food than any other form of therapy there was, because that's the basis of the anabolic drive. If you don't have the resources and you don't have the rest and you don't have the hydration, then the smartest doctors and therapists in the world can't do anything for you.
Hey, it's Andy Petronic, and welcome back. This is episode number 145 of the Andy Petronic Podcast. This is where it's my job to talk health, life, and well-being with the foremost leaders in the field, giving you the joy, knowledge, and inspiration you need to live your best life. Coming up today, I'm having a conversation with Paul Chek. He is known around the world for his ability to heal, treat, and fix the unhealable, the unfixable. He's also built a small army of Chek trained practitioners around the world who do what he does. But before we talk to Paul, I've got a few things to say. This is the first week of the Whole Life Challenge. Now, if you haven't joined and you haven't jumped in, it's not too late. We keep registration open for about 10 days. For all you people that are having regrets or that are thinking, gosh, I really should have done that. Or, gosh, I don't know how I'm going to keep it together for the next 6 weeks in the summer so that I don't have so much to work off at the end of the summer. I'm going to be able to do it. Those are all great reasons to join. It's also a great reason to join just to keep yourself on track. If you did the last challenge or did the January challenge, you know, I've done every one. I've done like 21, I think. Night 20. I don't know. I really should know the number, but I have found benefit every single time I've played the Whole Life Challenge. So it helps me. It's kind of my North Star. Helps me find my way. So my team, if you want to join it, is called Summertime is Showtime. So join the game and then join my team. And I'm doing a little experiment this time, actually. I've created a Facebook group, a private, secret Facebook group, and I'm asking people to use the live video feature on their phone and to share with group via live video. So if you're interested in doing that, in addition to being on my team, in addition to playing the Whole Life Challenge, I'd love to have you on my team. Now, before I forget to get to it, I made a promise on Facebook and Instagram that I would tell you guys about a discount code for getting a health test, a blood test, an internal marker test that'll test your cholesterol, glucose, and inflammation from our new partner, our new Whole Life Challenge partner. They're called Health Test Express. And there isn't a code. Actually, there is a code. There's a link and a code. That's why I was a little bit confused now. The code is all caps, Whole Life, WHOLELIFE. And the link to use is www.healthtestexpress.com/WLC. Do that. You'll get 20% off your home test kit. And yep, more on that later in the podcast. During the challenge, I publish workouts. I've said this before, but I'm just going to remind you, if you're looking for like, what should I do in like 10 minutes, when you have no equipment, you might be in a hotel room, you might be stuck somewhere, there's no gym, there's no dumbbells, and you need a workout to do. I've got 30 of them now. You can find the list of them all. They're actually published by the Whole Life Challenge, but the list of them is on my website. It's andypetronic.com/workouts. Also on my website is where you could subscribe to my newsletter. It's called Stepping Up, and it's got, I publish it once a month only, and it's got like pithy, bulleted action items that you can check into. See, I mean, they're really the things that I'm up to and the things that I'm discovering and exploring. And they are quite useful. And people have told me that they're quite useful. And if you're looking for things like that, and you want a little bit more Andy Petronic, you can find him there. You can subscribe on my website, andypetronic.com. Listen, I want to tell you too, I'm really excited. We've got 3 really cool, I'm just going to tell you about 3. We've got a bunch of guests coming up on the podcast, but the next 3 are all men. I've got Kevin Carter. You probably don't know his name, but he was a Super Bowl champ, played football for many years. He's a really, really big human being, but he's also a huge philanthropist. That's what really got me inspired about what he does and why he does it. But his most important role in life is what he considers his most important role is as husband and father. And we have a really, really deep and good conversation. That'll be coming up. Charles Mayfield is the author of Paleo Comfort Foods. It was one of the first cookbooks to ever come out about paleo, and since then he's released 2 or 3 more. He does it in partnership with his wife. All of the meals that they photograph in the book are edible, and they're edible like right on the spot. They took the picture and you could have eaten them, which is kind of amazing. He said one of the days they did a photo shoot, they had to prepare like 30 different meals, which is crazy to me. But he's also a home regenerative farmer. He's got 2 kids, and we have a great conversation about regenerative farming, how you might learn how to do it if you're interested, and why you might be interested, why it's important that we're all interested in regenerative farming. And then lastly, but certainly not least, Josh Mance was an Army vet. He is an Army vet, and he actually had the experience of dying and then coming back to life. He spent 15 minutes clinically dead. I'm just going to let that sink in for a second. He comes on the podcast to share his experience and to share what he's learned after that, because the recovery from that is not the physical recovery, more the emotional recovery is quite a story. It's quite an epic story, and he's quite an epic guy. So I'm looking forward to that as well. Now, let's get to Paul Chek. Paul was one of my first teachers in the health and fitness world. He ran the Chek Institute, and it was a program I heard about very early in my personal training career. And I decided he was the best person to learn from. Like bar none, he had his C.H.E.K together, and more so than anybody else I knew. And I decided to take his programs. But before I could do it, I had to go through correspondence courses online. Actually, it was before online. They were by video. He had to send me these correspondence courses. They had tests. They were incredibly difficult. And I did. And I ended up training at the Chek Institute. And he has been doing this now for the Chek Institute's been around for 25 years. His career spans over 30 years. He is got this unbelievable ability to aggregate healing methods that are seemingly dissimilar from many different walks of life, which is one of the reasons he's able to heal the unhealable. And one of the reasons I wanted him on the podcast was to talk about how to integrate this stuff. Like for normal human beings who are probably not going to spend the money to go see him in person. First of all, finding a Chek practitioner is always an option. But if you're not going to go see Paul and not going to spend money on a Chek practitioner, how do you proceed? What's important? What has he learned over the last 30 years of treating people and healing things that are unhealable? So this is a wild conversation. He says quite a lot of controversial, what might be construed as controversial things. He's incredibly passionate about what he does, and he knows a lot about healing, and he's very vocal about his opinion about the way other people, the dogmatic approach to healing that is prevalent in a lot of other parts of the world. So hang on to your seats. It's a really wild and really valuable conversation with a lot of really great takeaways. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Here, let's bring in Paul Chek. Paul Chek, welcome to the podcast. It's so great to have you on.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here and excited to share whatever I can share. So hit me with your best shot.
Careful. No, I've been a huge, you probably don't remember me particularly. I do actually. Now that I see you, I do remember having you in classes in the past sometime. A long time ago, 2002, I think, maybe 2001. I was in a class with Chris Mond and Janet Alexander, and they taught me my level 1 and level 2. And that was when it was called Corrective High Performance Exercise Kinesiologist.
Yeah.
And then I did the one of the first holistic lifestyle coach programs. It was in San Diego. It was before you moved offices. I've never been to the new places that the Chek Institute moved. It was in Encinitas.
Okay, yeah, it's been a while. We've been there we first moved from Encinitas to Vista, and we were there for, I think, 12 or 13 years. And then we moved to Carlsbad. Gotcha.
Yeah, so I was there a long time ago, and then after I was going down the road of becoming a holistic corrective exercise specialist, and then I bumped into CrossFit accidentally, and that just triggered a cascade of kind of my roots as I was a former Marine, and it just pulled me into this, like, I just loved it. It resonated with so much of what I was already doing as a functional coach, but gave it a system, jacked up the intensity, which was appropriate for me at the time. And I started one of the early on CrossFit gyms in the world, actually, CrossFit Los Angeles, back in 2004. So, but I always attributed a lot of my ability to do that well to... I brought in so much depth of knowledge around functional movement and core movement, and I had such a depth of knowledge around movement from my training with you and from your videos. I have a funny story I want to share with you also about that. That I was able to actually really serve people in a way that was very different than a lot of people's experience with CrossFit gyms subsequently.
That's, as you can imagine, I've had countless numbers of people ask my opinion and interview me on my feelings about CrossFit. And we have a number of Chek practitioners, even high-level Chek practitioners. Ross Ethorn, I think his name is, if I remember right. He's a level 3 practitioner in Singapore. And I think he's heavily involved in the CrossFit movement. But the difference is that Chek professionals have the assessment training and the technical skill to differentiate things like muscle imbalance syndromes, postural dysfunction, and they know how to structure an individual's developmental stages so that CrossFit doesn't just destroy them. And a number of them have actually implemented strategies to make CrossFit work for the long run instead of just being a source of income for surgeons. In fact, I know a lot of surgeons, and I had one surgeon say to me one day, I hadn't seen him in years, and he leans to me kind of in a whisper, and he says, "What do you think of all this CrossFit stuff?" And I said, "Well, if somebody knows how to prepare for it, it's great. It's a great way to really express yourself and develop your athletic ability. But I said, if somebody's not prepared for it, it's a great way to put money in an orthopedic surgeon's pocket." And he just smiled. He goes, "We are making a lot of money off of it."
Right. Which is really not funny, but, I think the movement triggered a whole cascade of shifts in the personal training world, in the fitness world. I mean, when you started making it okay for people to compare what they were doing to what other people could do, you brought a whole context. And when you added the stopwatch and, things that were really reserved for endurance athletes, 5K runners, sprinters, or, maybe boxers, where you have the stopwatch, it just introduced a whole new way of thinking. And it was cool. But yeah, I think you're right. Before we get any further, I want to tell you that my wife knows you quite intimately because when we first met, we went on this vacation to Sedona where we were doing some mountain biking and hanging out. But I brought with me my entire video of my library of Chek videos because it was before my level 1 thing, and I had to finish them. And I was so into it. I watched, I don't know how many hours, 15 or 20 hours of Chek videos on that vacation. She still talks about knowing you from those videos.
And many husbands and wives of Chek students have said that to me. They go, "Oh God, I know your voice like the back of my hand."
Absolutely. So yeah, it's you have that loving place in my household still to this day. So,
well, if you just look at scientific core conditioning, for example, I mean, I don't remember when I produced that, but it was like when I was probably 36 years old, and I'll be 57 in August. So. But if you look at the gamut of exercises and the developmental sequences that I shared in there, it goes all the way up to high performance type exercises used in CrossFit environments and every functional exercise environment today, long before that stuff was even happening.
Right. So
the point that I'm making is for people that are into CrossFit, the whole concept of CrossFit is really just a mix of a variety of types of exercises that have been around for a long time.
Yeah.
And what I was doing with all those initial education programs is showing people how to progressively build yourself up to that level of training. Unfortunately, we just have, a whole culture that for many reasons doesn't want to do the developmental work and just wants to go eat the icing on the cake and can't figure out why they have pimples and back pain.
Right. Right. Well, I want to, before we get into some of the nitty gritty stuff, I just want to give people a background of you, like how, you're known around the world as this guy, at least in my opinion, as this guy that can basically heal the unhealable, treat the untreatable, fix the unfixable. I knew you as that back in 2002. Where did that come from? How did you first know that you had a gift with either a gift or just a practice of fixing people, fixing things?
Well, my career really got started when I fought my way onto the Army boxing team. And while I was on the Army boxing team fighting as a fighter, which was a full-time job, at that time we were the 3rd ranked amateur boxing team in the world. We'd only been beat by Cuba and Russia. So it's a pretty full-time, very intense situation. But I also represented the Army in triathlon, and I trained for triathlon and boxing at the same time. So I was basically doing close to double the amount of work the fighters on the boxing team were, and they could barely handle that. And I had, very, very unique holistic ways of eating, and I structured how I lost weight because I didn't have a lot of body fat at my normal walking around weight, which in that time was about 168 pounds, and I fought at 147. So I had to lose over 20 pounds to make fighting weight, and I was only probably 7-8% body fat to begin with. So the point I'm getting to is that the coaches and the athletes on the team were quite baffled as to how in the hell I could do all that training, and still they always were amazed that I could fight hard for all 3 rounds. And they had, at that time, they had a lot of problems with athletes burning out in the 3rd round, which is a death sentence when you're in international competitions against people like the Cubans and the Russians, because those guys, they come from very impoverished environments, and their whole life is based on getting out of that environment. So to be on an elite sports team is like having the red carpet rolled out for you, and your whole life is transformed, and it opens the door to Olympic possibilities and future possibilities. So they're fighting their way out of a life they don't want to live. So for the average Westerner, there's not nearly that much psychological investment in training well. So the what happened is the coach, my company commander, who was betting a lot of money on me in athletic events all the time, and I was winning a lot. I was in the newspapers a lot in the military. I was in the 82nd Airborne Division, so it's a huge athletic competition environment. And we competed against the Recon Rangers, the Navy SEALs, and all the special forces. And I was famous for having never been beaten by a Navy SEAL, which gave me a lot of credibility. And my real job in the military was repairing weapon systems on Cobra helicopters, which is a highly technical job, and I'm in an aviation unit. So to have a aviation soldier that was regularly torturing what they call grunts, the foot soldiers and the Rangers and all the guys that are thought to be the badasses, well, my company commander was just eating this up and making a lot of money betting on me. So he said to me, look, I really want you to win the Army triathlon. If you want to quit boxing so you can train full-time for triathlon, I'll support you in that. So I knew I wasn't going to turn pro because I didn't start fighting till I was 12. And against we had guys in our boxing team that at 19 already had 320 sanctioned fights under their belt and started fighting when they were 6. So it's believe it or not, there's a big difference in the skill level when you start a kid off at about 6 years of age versus 12 years. And I lived on Vancouver Island, so we just had a little podunk boxing gym and only could fight a couple of times a year. Almost all of our fighting was basically sparring, what we called gym wars, versus guys on the boxing team were traveling all over the United States, their parents in motorhomes and going tournament to tournament. So I knew that turning pro wasn't my future because my fighting style was not, it was too Ray Mancini. I don't know if you ever knew Ray Mancini, but I was, kind of like, I'm going to go at you and I'm going to wear you out and I'm going to hurt you. But with guys at that level, you can't do that because they just hurt you too much.
Yep.
And I didn't want to be brain dead. So the point being is when the opportunity for training full-time for triathlon came, I was ready to jump on it. But when I told the coaches I was going to leave and train full-time for triathlon, they got on their knees practically and begged me to stay and become the trainer. And they said they would turn over the writing of all the gym programs for the athletes, managing the gym, handling all the nutrition training for the athletes, and working with the team doctor who is an osteopathic physician to care for all the injuries, not only in the Army boxing team, but our gym was the headquarters for all the elite sportsmen in the 82nd Airborne Division, which had 80,000 soldiers. So it's like a small city, and there was a lot of great athletes in powerlifting and track and field. So I got exposed to a lot of different environments. And once they turned the training over me, and I also implemented the first massage therapy program and did all the massage work for 30 fighters all by myself. And I just studied massage therapy out of books. And my grandmother, when I was a kid, I had asthma, and she used to do massage therapy on me. It was the only thing that would take it away. So from an early age, I had this connection to massage therapy and the power of it, and somehow I just intuitively knew what to do, even though I hadn't been to massage school. And I got wild results with people, and the team doctor was just blown away. Like within the first 3 to 6 months, the injury rate dropped down about 90%, and the athletes were all just begging me to work on them all the time. So what happened is I started getting so much positive feedback from the team doctor, the coaches, and the athletes that I felt this deep sense in my heart that I was really making a contribution to people's lives. Mm-hmm. And something was, before that time, I was hell-bent for leather to win everything I went into. I was a very, very competitive athlete as a young man in martial arts, boxing, motocross racing. Those were my main sports. I played lots of sports, hockey, football, basketball, baseball, but I excelled in motocross and I excelled in boxing and martial arts. So once I got this deeper level of fulfillment because I was helping other people achieve their dreams, goals, and objectives, it was as though I was seized by the heartstrings, which today in Jungian terms would be an archetypal possession. I was I found my life path, and I knew it at a very deep level. And so because my mother's a yogi and my father's a farmer, and they're very holistic people, and I was raised with a solid grounding in these practices and even meditation and natural eating, and a lot of the things that I teach today were just commonplace in my household. And when I saw how other athletes ate, lived, trained, and the belief systems that they had been seized by, it was easy for me to see where their deficits were and how to enhance their performance with even small things like dietary changes or just drinking more water, stuff that most people think are insignificant but turned out to be very significant. So when I got out of the Army, the best thing I could do to practice as a professional and have a license was to go to sports massage therapy school, because I could use my knowledge of exercise and mix it with massage therapy, which is what I did in the Army. And I just wanted to continue doing what I was doing there. So I just continued intensive study in everything I could, traveled the world. I spent an average of about $16,000 a year for the first 16 years of my career, but between $16,000 and $35,000 a year, depending on how much money I could afford, traveling all over the world, taking courses from the best doctors, the best physical therapists, chiropractors, osteopaths, Feldenkrais practitioners, Alexander practitioners, whoever I thought had a key to something that I saw cropping up in my clientele. And I always asked the question, what causes that? What causes that? I developed a reputation in San Diego for being the guy to send medical failures to. So I would get people with 2 medical charts, 2 inches thick. Sometimes it would take me a week just to read through their charts. And I would see, okay, they've seen 10 chiropractors, they've seen 5 neurologists, they've had all these drugs, but what haven't they tried? Well, so my approach was to say, well, it's obviously not an issue of chiropractic or spinal manipulation. It's obviously not, something that a neurologist is going to fix. So I began studying, and I had been studying. I'd done 5 cadaver dissections by the time I was about 28. And I began studying systems integration. And as I kept looking deeper and deeper into any given problem, say low back pain, for example, well, I would start finding research saying, for example, that women after L5-S1 disc surgeries often lost their menstrual cycle and would have all sorts of unexpected and unexplainable changes in the uterus and the ovaries, for example. And so they would then suggest that there was a viscerosomatic connection. So when I started seeing these threads, I would follow them up. So I studied the autonomic nervous system intensively. I studied viscerosomatic reflexes. I studied Byron Robinson, MD's original works on the abdominal brain that came out in 1899 and in his second book in 1907, which even if it was published today would still be blowing people's minds. And to make a long story short, I always would go into the literature and even into highly specialized literature in European journals and foreign journals, and some of them I couldn't even read. I could only look at the pictures and draw knowledge from that, which often led me to other clues. I also went to the Czech Republic and did advanced training with Vladimir Janda and Karel Levitt, who are some of the world's leading experts. They're probably both dead now. I know Janda died. I did all of Yanda's training and his advanced training and studied with Levitt. And they were heavy into chain reaction patterns, visceral connections. And this led me over the course of my 32-year career now to studying everything from anatomy and physiology to subtle energy systems, chakras, acupuncture meridian systems, the psyche, depth psychology. I studied world religion because over and over and over again, I found that what was actually driving people to behave the way they were was often pain from some kind of belief that God was going to burn them in hell, or some sort of religious conviction that if they didn't do this or they didn't do that, which would lead them to using exercise as an escape or drugs as an escape. And then I found a huge amount of family trauma involved in people's inability to heal or their addictions. I studied addiction. I studied everything that I had to study to keep answering the question, what causes that? What causes that? What causes that? And that gave me the ability, because I was able to look into the areas of people's lives that nobody was looking. And in fact, many people criticized me for looking there, but they couldn't deny I was getting results with patients. In fact, I even had doctors tearing me a strip off my backside saying, what are you doing talking to people about this or doing that? That has nothing to do with the problem that I sent them to you for. And I would just smile and say, and why is it that you called me? And then there's a moment of silence, because the patient got rehabilitated in as little as 6 visits sometimes after they'd been in therapy for 2 years. Mm-hmm. And so you're actually calling me because you're amazed that the patient's rehabilitated, but you're criticizing me for how I did it. Is that really a logical approach to take here? Why not ask me how I did it?
Right, right.
That's basically, in a nutshell, how I sort of branched out.
Right.
But I invested huge amounts of time and energy to practice. This was not an intellectual process. When I studied Feldenkrais, I did over 100 hours of training with a guy, for example, that was trained with Feldenkrais, practiced it in my life. Everything I study, I put it into work in my own life so I could get an internal experience of it, so that I knew what exactly was a person going to go through. And I did the same with diet, with gut rehab, with everything that I had to study.
Sorry for the interruption, but I want to bring to you and tell you about our new Whole Life Challenge sponsor. They're called Health Test Express. One of the most important things that we talk about doing for the Whole Life Challenge is identifying where you are. And identifying where you are means some sort of assessment. And it's very difficult, typically, to know what's going on inside your body. You have to get a doctor to order a blood test. You have to go into a lab. They have to, find a vein and pull your blood out. Well, there's a better way. And the better way is using our new sponsor called Health Test Express. If you order a test kit from them, they will send you out this, now, I'm sure it's different for each test, but the test kit I got, which is for enhanced lipids with cholesterol, it's a little plastic box, and you prick your finger, and you get a little drop of blood at the end of your finger. You drop the blood in squares on a special piece of paper, 5 different spots, and you let it dry. You seal it up, you stick it in an envelope that's prepaid, and you send it back to them, and voila, you're done. It's incredibly easy, and you'll get your enhanced lipids with cholesterol test kit. Now, Health Test Express has a whole slew of other tests they have on their website. So if you have specific issues and specific things you want to get tested, they might have a way to do it that's way simpler than what you're currently doing. Or maybe you're curious about some other test in your body. You go to www.healthtestexpress.com/WLC. And if you use the code WHOLELIFE, in all caps, WHOLELIFE, it will give you a 20% discount on your at-home test kit for the specific one I mentioned, enhanced lipids with cholesterol. So that is it. Enjoy, and let's get back to the podcast. Well, I think the really cool thing that differentiates you from just anybody else out there who spends 30 years studying stuff is you not only studied it, but you built a program to teach other people how to use those tools at whatever level they were capable of using them to also do what you were doing. And your impact and your footprint on the world has been way more significant because of that. Rather than just studying yourself. When did you start to put together a plan or a notion that that's what you were going to do? Or did it just come about by hook and by crook, by accident?
Well, what happened is in 1988 is when I introduced the Swiss ball to the world of exercise as something other than just an aerobics, jumpy, bumpy, bounce on it, play with it ball, and developed comprehensive systems for analyzing movement and correcting muscle imbalances and developing athletes and using it as a rehab tool in ways that had never been done before. And one of the things that hit me in 88, 89, particularly 88, was as I said, I had almost all the people that came to me were people that nobody knew what to do with. And I worked with tons of elite athletes. You know, I was the first person, for example, I taught the Chicago Bulls how to implement my core conditioning and Swiss ball methods. They were the first to hire me. And then many teams and Olympic committees after that hired me, but they wanted the edge. So what I'm saying is that it dawned on me one day that here I am working with a lot of the best athletes in the world and a lot of people that are just normal, everyday doctors, nurses, truck drivers, and they're having to get injured to come to learn from me the things that I felt everyone should know. Every personal trainer should know how to analyze a person effectively, or they don't know how to prescribe exercise effectively. And remember, doctors and physical therapists and chiropractors and osteopaths don't go past a pink dumbbell and a stretch cord. Yeah. But you got personal trainers loading people up at 2 times body weight, and they don't have the beginning skills to assess an individual. And that's enough force to destroy someone. And when you consider that research shows very clearly 72% of all human beings have an undiagnosed disc bulge that's ready to blow out at any minute. So the gym's loaded with booby traps, and we have even to this day, the skill level is scary, scary low. I mean, if anyone in a gym should have a minimum of a physical therapist level of training. And so I found it sad, and it dawned on me that I really could do a lot to serve the world by bringing the knowledge that I had to give injured people out to the public as a mainstream offering, so that they could do preventative or prophylactic conditioning. So that, for example, if you knew how to do a Swiss ball supine lateral ball roll, you could improve core stability and spinal stability radically if you only did 3 sets of that 3 times a week at the end of one of your workouts. Because to do the exercise properly, you have to target the muscles that are typically weak in people. If there's no, I designed these exercises based on anatomy and physiology and human movement, so that if they're done correctly, there's no way you can avoid targeting the right muscles, sling systems, and integration systems. And that's what ultimately led me to writing my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, is what I just had to keep telling everyone how to analyze their poops, how to analyze their pee, how to analyze their diet, how they should be moving, how they should be breathing. I mean, I've hardly met a handful of doctors and therapists, even at the elite level, that actually either knew how to breathe or could breathe properly themselves. So over the years, I just said, I've got to release this out to the general public, because this is not information that a person can afford to only learn when they're injured, because now they're injured and the damage is done. And if this was able to get to athletes preventatively, it could, help enhance sports at every level, bring our athletic performance up. It could cut insurance costs down, workman compensations costs down. It could save marriages. I mean, I've seen lots of lives ruined by people getting a bad injury at work, being disabled, and then their income drops so much, their family's under so much stress, and then a lot of these injuries stop people from normal sexual intimacy, which then complicates a relationship. And I've seen many divorces happen over these types of complications, and I felt like I could help a lot of people avoid all these problems. And so actually it was Charles Poliquin who really, interestingly enough, triggered me to start the Chek Institute, because I owned my own physical therapy clinic with a partner in La Jolla, California. And Charles, who had studied my work and was very interested in my work, and who I helped rehabilitate the famous hockey player Gary Roberts when he was forced into medical retirement, he hired me to train his top 3 conditioning coaches that worked under him in my science of assessing the core and posture and all that. So they actually became my first 3 students. And Charles told me, he said, Paul, if you didn't study a damn thing for 10 years, you'll still be way ahead of everybody. And so here I was working with 3 of the top strength coaches in the world, working under Charles, and everything I was teaching them was absolutely mind-blowing and revolutionary to them. And they're like, damn, like this is so far ahead of what we're doing out there. It's a joke. And so I realized if at the highest level of strengthening and conditioning, there was that big of a deficit, which I already knew there was in the rehab community, in the medical community, because I worked in it for many years, then it's time for me to start an institute and teach this stuff. And because I had so much experience with multiple different medical professionals of all types, I made my program multidisciplinary because I felt it was essential for the doctors and the therapists and the strength coaches and the trainers to understand what each other's strengths were so they knew how and when to refer to these people, because that's very missing in our culture. And there's all this professional territorialism, you know, physical therapists don't like chiropractors, chiros don't like physios. There's all this silly infighting. And so my system was a chance to bring them all together under one roof. And my depth of knowledge was significant enough that even the most highly trained, like one of my students is a Chek level 3 practitioner who's a physiatrist in charge of rehab at the Mayo Clinic. And he was taking what he was learning in the Chek program back to the Mayo Clinic's physical therapists, and they were just blown away by it. And they, you know, and it was hard for them to swallow that a guy with a 9th grade education had developed all this stuff. But the point I'm making is that I was able to take people from very diverse professions, from nursing and chiropractic to even truck drivers coming into my program because they'd been rehabbed by a Chek professional, decided that's what they wanted to do, and put them in a room and say, look, this is what you're good at, but this is what you're missing. This is what you're good at, this is what you're missing. And here's how you do an evaluation to decide which of these people you need to send somebody to. And here are the skills that I can teach you. And my skill level crossed all these barriers, but because I work in a medical environment, I was able to do a lot of things. I'm licensed to give medical injections as a physician assistant, so I was doing medical injection. I'd been to surgery countless times. So whenever, for example, I'm trained in intrapelvic work, I can work vaginally or rectally, and I'm trained. And as long as a physician signed on the prescription for me to do that, it was legal. But if I screwed up, it was his license. So naturally, they knew my work and they trusted me, and I'd rehabbed a lot of patients that no one could figure out. So they had no problem doing that. The point I'm making is I could operate all the way up to levels that would be considered clinical medical practice. So I could teach my students, but I would say, look, I can teach you these things, but no, if your license does not allow you to do this, then this training is for you to know when you need to refer to somebody. And then I would say, for example, if it was an atlas subluxation, the National Upper Cervical Chiropractic Association is a system that's worldwide, and you can refer to these people. So it allowed me to integrate a lot of concepts and a lot of people to create a truly holistic system.
So at that point, were you more businessman or more holistic practitioner? Or did you hire someone to be the business person?
Well, the first attempt at the Chek Institute, I went bankrupt. I lost everything.
Jeez.
The Americans were just not interested. It's kind of sad. I would run courses and I'd spend, $50,000 to market a course through all these different professions. Remember, this is back when it used to cost $1 a piece for a nice color brochure. We had to mail them all out, and I would get mailing lists with 30, 40, 50,000 names. So sometimes I had 40, 50 grand invested before the workshop would even start. And it was wild because sometimes I'd get 85 people showing up and other times I'd get 5, and there was no rhyme or reason. So when I investigated, the most common thing that came up as to why people weren't taking my workshops is because I didn't have a college degree and they didn't know what a holistic health practitioner was and how can this guy teach me anything. But what happened was people from Australia and New Zealand started getting a hold of my stuff and reading magazine articles I'd written in major magazines like Muscle and Fitness or Muscle Media 2000, or they'd see my ads for my courses and videos in things like the Idea magazines or National Strength and Conditioning Association. So they started hiring me and flying me down there, and the Australians and the New Zealanders just ate it up. And I had doctors and therapists of all types coming. And so I lost everything in the United States. And so I spent about 5 years traveling almost nonstop through Australia and New Zealand, did hundreds of trainings over there. Wow. And built a huge base of Chek professionals. And after about 5 years, I started getting phone calls like once every 2 weeks from pissed off American therapists and trainers going, why in the hell are you teaching all this stuff to those guys? They're our competition. Why aren't you teaching us? And they would say things like, I was in New Zealand on vacation. And I went to a gym and the trainers there knew 10 times more than we do. And when I started asking, where'd you get all this stuff? They said from San Diego, California. And he said, it blew my mind. And so I would say to the Americans, I gave you guys a shot. You were too up yourselves. So now you have to suffer the fact that you're way behind. Mm-hmm. So I had to go through a lot of financial stress and a lot of personal sadness and pain that I could not implement those strategies on an educational level. I was very famous for my work with patients, but I knew that that was too limiting. I couldn't impact the world one person at a time like that. So I had to go all the way to the South Pacific to kick it off. And when I met Penny was really at the lowest point kind of in my career just after I went bankrupt. And Penny's, a businesswoman. She's got 3 master's degrees, one in biological anthropology, one in exercise and sports science, and one in business. So when she and I got together, she really likes the business end of things. And she told me she learned more in one 3-day workshop with me than she did in her whole entire exercise and sports science master's degree program. So she was inspired because she could see the power of it. And so Penny took over the business management of it. And my focus has always been to master what I'm building and continue to grow my skills and abilities. And, over the years, my clients just get more and more complicated. That's how it is. Mm-hmm. And so I really kind of divide my time between research development, and I still maintain a practice because I'm still growing as a therapist. And then for 25 years, we traveled nonstop on airplanes all over the world, lecturing in conferences I've lectured in medical schools, physical therapy schools, chiropractic schools, massage therapy schools, strength coaching conferences, personal training conferences, medical conferences. I mean, I'm one of the few people that's actually developed and advanced each of these different professions by adding awareness to these technologies that I brought in. So that's really kind of how we grew the business. And Penny, she's in charge of the business, which we've now gotten a partner in because it got so big, even it was just too much for Penny to manage because we have a worldwide business. And at one time we had 21 instructors traveling the world, pretty much constantly teaching all over the world, and a large staff of employees. And
how many Chek practitioners are there now?
There's over 10,000 of them.
Wow.
Yeah.
What would you say is because I know you continue to grow and you were growing. I mean, I remember being down there in 2002 and you passed through our course one day and you were experimenting with some concoction of water and fertilizer and God knows what was in your bottle you were drinking, and people were like, what in the world is, and you were on a mission, didn't have much time and passing through. And I just remember that guy. I want to know a little bit. If I can learn just a little bit of what he's got going on, I'll be doing something. And I'm just curious how, as you have learned more and more and more and developed a deeper understanding of who we are as human beings and why we make the choices that we make, how have you continued to guide your Chek practitioners into following the right course? Like I remember when I left level 1, my course was, I had a very specific protocol of how to do things. The postural assessment, and then level 2, it ramp things up. But you're, not way notches ahead. How did you keep pace? And where are you with that now? I guess, I don't know if maybe that's too many questions.
Well, I think I understand what you're asking. Like I said, as your knowledge grows, you are capable of asking deeper and more meaningful questions because you have more consciousness to work with.
Yes.
Consciousness is essentially the total informational capacity of any system. So the more knowledge you have, the more conscious you are. And therefore, the more questions you can ask because you know what questions need to be answered. Mm-hmm. And so what I did is, and what I do is with the system, when I realized how essential issues of nutrition and lifestyle factors were, because I tested that extensively in my own research and testing on myself, testing pH levels and testing metabolic typing and doing all sorts of investigations like that. And, for example, I found that I could do more to rehabilitate somebody by getting their diet right and switching them to organic food than any other form of therapy there was, because that's the basis of the anabolic drive. If you don't have the resources and you don't have the rest and you don't have the hydration, then the smartest doctors and therapists in the world can't do anything for you because you can't mount up an anabolic response. So basically, my first, originally it was called the Chek Corrective Holistic Exercise Kinesiology Institute, but at that time, all of our marketing experts told me not to use the word holistic because people associate it with the hippie era and that it wasn't something that was going to sell because,
right.
I had a hard time selling it in the United States. So they said to put high performance in there instead of holistic. So we had to change the name back because 10 years later, it was hip to be holistic.
Right.
But nobody realized I'm the guy that pioneered that damn concept. So the original nutrition and lifestyle coaching program is what was my offering to say, here's what I've tested clinically, here's what I know to be true. And then we've grown that now to 3 levels. And that's where I get people involved in subtle energy anatomy and learning a lot about the other things. And then I developed the PPS Success Mastery Program, which really looks deep inside the individual's belief systems, their fears, the challenges they've had in their life, and gives them a system for making meaning out of them. And PPS Lesson 2 shows how the science of brainwashing is being used against you by marketing agencies and religions all the time. And so I show you how to use the same tactics to clean all the negative, self-defeating thoughts, fears, and beliefs right out of your own head. Instead of letting them do it to you, do it to yourself to make your mind dream affirmative so that you can go out and create what you want to create with all the kind of constant back chatter and the negative thinking inside of yourself and all the negative effects of that, which psychoneuroimmunology has scientifically documented for many, many years now. So between PPS Success, holistic lifestyle coaching, 4 levels of Chek practitioner training, which takes the average person 4 years to complete. And my most recent development was the Chek 4-quadrant coaching, which is actually more comprehensive than all the other stuff combined. There's over 800 slides in the 4 presentations, and it's designed to take each individual through the healing of their psyche. And they're looking at belief systems and behaviors and the archetypes that are behind all that. And how do you coach a person through a transition, a healing transition, or a life crisis? How do you assess the level of consciousness that they're at? And I studied Ken Wilber's work and many others looking at how consciousness grows and develops so that we could categorize where somebody's at and know where to take them. I studied alchemy for years and years. I've studied Carl Jung's, I've got his collected works, and I've been studying him for probably 15 years intensively. And now I've developed my own system called Chek Life Process Alchemy, which is offered in the new Chek 4-quadrant system. But it's the only system of alchemy in the world that actually looks at the spiritual components, the mental components, and the physical and the physiological elements all as one working system. And I show how every one of those functions affects everything else in the body. And that's probably my greatest achievement to date, is that system of alchemy, which I'm about to unveil for the acupuncturist. I was asked to be the keynote speaker for the upcoming 30th annual Pacific College of Oriental Medicine conference here in San Diego. And they asked me if I would be interested in doing a 2-day workshop. So I'm going to do a 2-day, first time I'll be doing a 2-day workshop on my alchemy system. And I'm excited to share it with the acupuncturists because they have enough knowledge to understand what I'm talking to them about. One of my big challenges as an educator is that personal trainers on average have way, way, way too low of an education to even handle my entry-level correspondence courses,
Yep.
you know?
Yep.
And the medical people aren't much better. They went to school, passed the test, but didn't really learn that much. And so the acupuncturists, because they're versed in subtle anatomy and they're versed in the systems of nature and Chinese medicine, none of the concepts that I share in my alchemy system are unusual to them. I just show them a different system of how the systems interact and how the psyche interacts, because they don't have anything on the psyche really in acupuncture. It's all it's all meridian systems and physical organs and glands, but they never, stereotypically, they never ask the question, well, why is it that person's adrenals are fatigued? Why is it that their triple warmer meridian is deficient? They just try to balance it, which is kind of like taking a pill for a headache and never asking yourself, why do I have the headache? But the good news is they have the knowledge of the basic system. So when I show them my system, I'm quite sure it's going to blow their minds. Because
that's exciting.
I've shared it with other elite people, and they've been blown away.
Paul, so all this stuff is amazing. I can already hear my wheels turning in my own head.
Good.
Here's what I'm thinking. Paul, all this stuff is fine and dandy, but what does someone do with all this? I mean, like the average person that is maybe listening to this podcast is like, I mean, somebody comes in to see you that's got maybe back pain or, whatever they've got. How do you guide them? How do you give them, I'll tell you what, there are two things. How do you give them what they want, and also give them what they need in spite of them thinking they don't need that? Sorry for the brief interruption, but I got to tell you, one of the best things I ever did, you've heard me say it before, I'm going to say it again, is order my meals for lunch online from The Good Kitchen. The Good Kitchen provides sustainably sourced, organic, whole food that is Whole Life Challenge compliant, that's keto compliant, that's paleo compliant, that's vegetarian, whatever option you choose. They'll deliver it right to your doorstep via FedEx. I get it, and one of the things it does for me is it clears up my brain. I don't have to think about lunch. I just go down to the fridge, open up a meal. Sometimes if I'm hungry, I just eat it. I don't even heat it up. Other times I put it on the stove and heat it up, or put it in the microwave. It is a game changer. They do breakfast, they do lunches, they do dinners. And for your first order, you want 15% off for giving it a try. And by the way, I recommend it highly if you're doing the Whole Life Challenge. The link is thegooDkitchen.com/WLC. Check it out. If you go there, do that, you'll get 15% off your first order. Now let's get back to the show.
It was around, I would guess, around 2004 through 2006. Even my most advanced students were coming to me going, Paul, I'm kind of in a predicament because I have a huge amount of knowledge, but I don't know how to synthesize it all together, because I can assess someone for 8 hours and then the patient's wondering, well, when the hell are you going to take my pain away?
Yeah, right.
And I have all this knowledge, but I'm having a hard time knowing what to do first and how to categorize it, because most of the people we assess have almost everything wrong that you've taught us to look for. So where do you start?
Right.
I realized this was a real problem, but you see, I have a system in my head for solving problems, and I have a system of hierarchy for knowing what is it that you should be doing first, what should you do second. So that feedback led me to, here's what happened. I wrote my ebook, The Last 4 Doctors You'll Ever Need, How to Get Healthy Now.
That's one of my next questions, yeah.
Yeah, and so what happened was Dan Millman, The Way of the Peaceful Warrior movie, he was working with some publishers, and they were publishing stuff by him, but they didn't have anything on health and exercise. So they had done research and decided I was the guy to contribute something. So they got a hold of me and said, we would love it if you could write us an ebook that we could sell that would encapsulate how it is that you go about directing people to change their lives and live so that they can implement the kind of strategies Dan Millman's talking about. And so what I did is I began to synthesize within myself and meditate. And a long story made short, I narrowed it down to the 4 key functions that everyone has to understand, or none of this stuff will work. And that's the 4 doctors. Dr. Happiness, what is my dream? What is my goal or objective? Why is it that I want to get better? A lot of people come to therapists, but they don't actually want to get better. Oftentimes it's the first time they've had personal attention, somebody massaging their body, listening to them, and they go, at a subconscious level, a lot of them don't want to get better because they're having sometimes the deepest, most meaningful relationship in their life with someone that's knowledgeable enough to give them sound feedback, talk to them, and really listen to their problems, and they make them feel better every time they go there. So I realized right away, a long, long time ago, if you don't clearly establish what it is in it for the patient, what is it that they want to do when they get rid of their back pain, their neck pain, their gut pain, their neurosis, their psychosis, whatever it is, then you're making the assumption that everybody wants to get better. But that overlooks the fact that, 85% of all orthopedic injuries are idiopathic, which means the physician cannot identify the cause. If you look into neurosis, which is a physical disruption or disease process induced psychologically, it's a massive, massive problem. If you look at hypochondria, basically a hypochondriac is a person who becomes so used to being injured or ill all the time that they get to the point where they wouldn't know who they were without their symptoms. So even though they're going to doctors and therapists, the thought of not having their back pain or their disease leaves them with such a sense of emptiness, they don't even know who they are anymore. So paradoxically, while they're spending all this money and insurance companies' money and government's money trying to get better, there's a bigger part of them who doesn't want to get better because now all their friends and all their connections are all people with illnesses and injuries. So I realized if you don't get clear on what it is that this person wants to do that's more exciting than being injured or collecting workman's compensation, and if you look at the number of people doing jobs that they don't really want to do, it's massive. I mean, people don't go to work to live. They go to work to do what they think they've got to do to survive, and then they don't start living till they come home and pull out the alcohol, the cigarettes, the pot, the whatever it is to alleviate the pain of the day, and then they play their video games or their model cars or whatever their thing is. But we have an entire culture that's been programmed to do what their parents told them to do or what the church told them to do or what a university told them to do. And though we call that the American dream, there's hardly any Americans that are actually living their own dream. They're living the dream that they were told they have to. You need to get a master's degree or you never make any money. You got to get a degree in this or you'll never be successful. If you want to be a musician or an artist, you'll never make it. You got to go to school to be a lawyer, a doctor, or a white-collar professional, ...
Paul, have you ever done something called a genogram? Do you know what a genogram is?
No.
So Tom, is it Tom Bradshaw? John Bradshaw. John Bradshaw is a famous American psychologist. He's written a lot of books. And I was in a program a few years ago where they introduced this idea of a genogram. And a genogram is your family tree, basically. Yeah. But instead of it being just your family tree, it traces back all the emotional and family behaviors and habits, significant events, married, divorced, alcoholic, the issues that were going on in your family and we trace back, I think, 3 or 4 generations. And
I do that in my own work. It
was amazing to see how the patterns just keep repeating. The same patterns. Yeah. It's no coincidence,
Yeah. And Rudolf Steiner talks about that extensively in his teachings on the soul. And he shows how any blockage to the flow of life force or consciousness that is not resolved will keep repeating itself in the gene line or in the individual until the energy is resolved. And now you have, for example, I don't know if you've seen Mark Wu Lin's book. It didn't start with you.
No, I haven't.
Well, that's an excellent book, and the audio book's read by him, and it's very, very good. But he identified that these problems do go 3 levels back. And so, but this has also been talked about in religions. It's in the Bible. It's in Hinduism. I mean, this is not new news. It's just new to people that are caught in a Western scientific materialist mindset. But the point that I'm making is the energy moves through us energetically. If you look at what DNA is, it's not what people think it is. DNA is a cosmic antenna system that taps into the morphic fields within which all of our ancestors' consciousness throughout history exists. And Sheldrake pioneered the concept of morphic fields, although there was others before him. But
what is a morphic field? I have no idea. Never heard of that.
A morphic field is a non-local field that carries the information that guides and directs the species.
Is it electric field? Is it energetic field? Is it
It's a non-local field, so it's not in the. There's no energy transfer needed. It's not in the realm of relativity. It's what's called a non-local field, which is really what science is showing that the mind is. It's a non-local field. It's everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. You just have to look up non-locality, for example, and you'll see. But it's really quantum physics is what brought us to the forefront of understanding non-locality. And
the basic premise is, there's definitely a lot more to it than this, but something doesn't exist until it's seen. There's that. That's not really related to the morphic fields, but basically you have to have an observer to collapse the wave function, to go it from a pure potential state into an actual state. Right.
So for all intensive purposes, the world does not exist if there's nobody looking at it.
Right.
But the morphic fields are actually fields. And a field, by definition, is a place of action, a magnetic field. If you put iron filings in the presence of a magnetic field, they will take a shape.
Yes.
And they will show you the magnetic field. So a morphic field, and there's one for every species of every creature on this planet. A morphic field is essentially an information field that's communicating through the DNA by sending information basically via photon emission and other systems that are non-local. But basically, there's tons of research. David Wilcock, if you look at the book, The Source Field Investigation, he shows all sorts of very wild information that's been suppressed from mainstream science, most of it out of Russia. For example, showing they can take a laser beam and pass the laser beam through the egg of, say, a chicken into the egg of a duck, and they can put the the genetic energy of a chicken into the duck and change the species. They can take and mix different species. They can make lizards become other animals, all by just moving energy on a laser beam into the embryonic environment.
We just lost, I don't know how many 100 listeners. What's this guy?
Well, basically, what it's saying is it basically boils down to this. Everything is energy and information. and everything is vibration. It's that simple.
Yeah.
There is nothing here that isn't vibrating. Even an atom, which used to be thought of as actual particles, is nothing but a vortex of energy and information. There's actually nothing in an atom. It's 99.999 to the ninth decimal point empty of anything. Your whole body looks real, but you're 99.99 to the ninth decimal place empty. It's just that the tiny little energy vortexes that are focusing there, that are producing what we call matter, are moving at just under the speed of light. So they're entangled around each other. So the analogy I give my students is, look, if you walk up to an airplane that's just sitting there, if it has 3 blades or 2 blades on the prop, it's easy to stick your hand in and out. If you turn it by hand, you can stick your hand between it. If you start the engine up, it looks like there's a wall of blades in front of you, right? So if you take that thing up, if you take the airplane's propeller up to the speed of light, and I ask my students, where will it be? Well, the answer is always, it'll be everywhere and nowhere at the same time. It'll be moving at the speed of light. So an atom is something that's moving just under the speed of light, but it's a vortex of energy that creates the illusion of solidity. So how this relates to the morphic fields is, all I'm saying is there are information fields that contain all the information of the entire species throughout the entire evolution of the species. And any of the challenges that are unresolved or that are created, for example, if you acquire cancer or you acquire an alcohol addiction, but nobody in your genetic tree, in your family, had those problems, you've now induced that deficit into the morphic field, and your children and their children will be susceptible to having that imbalance because it'll be communicated to them via the morphic field, and that's what guides and directs the cells.
Are you and I connected via the morphic field, or is this only generational?
We're all connected because we're all part of a species called human beings. Yeah. But the connection from family members is much stronger. Okay. Just like, as a paratrooper, we used to jump out of airplanes and do what are called mass attacks. And there's, a C-140 will hold about 161 paratroopers. And we jump out in strings. We're packed very tightly, and once we're approaching the drop zone, we have to go very fast because the plane's stall speed's 140 miles an hour, 140-something miles an hour, and the drop zones are usually only at about a mile to a mile and a half long. So at 140 miles an hour, a mile doesn't last long. So you've got to get out of there very fast. So the analogy I'm giving you, everybody in the airplane is connected together, just like human beings are connected through the morphic field. But if the guy right in front of you stops because he's afraid to jump, you can't get out the door, neither can anybody else. But it affects you very directly because he's the one that stopped in front of you. Right. And the guy behind you thinks you've stopped, so he's going to punch or kick you. Right. And this will have a chain reaction all through, but the point I'm making is the disease is like the guy stopping at the door, and it affects the people closest to you most because they're the most connected to you. Remember resonance. People with your own genes, just if you take a tuning fork that's tuned to 256 hertz or C and strike it near a piano, even though no one's at the piano will play the note C out of sympathetic resonance. So anybody that shares genes with us is in sympathetic resonance with us. So if we go out of tune, we pull them out of tune. If you're happy and you come home from work happy, then it's likely that everybody in the family is more inclined to happiness. Wow. But if you come home pissed off, everyone in sympathetic resonance with you has to really work hard not to fall into the trap that dad's in. It's exactly the same way with illnesses and diseases because everything is frequency. Is anger and upset stronger than happiness? Because it seems like that has a stronger effect on me, pulling me in that direction than I have on happiness walking in the door. Yes, because nobody usually dies of being happy, but anger is a survival reaction to a threat. If a neighboring tribesman is trying to attack your territory and take your food and your women and you don't get angry, you're not going to fight with the kind of intensity you have to fight to save lives. So the real use of anger is to amp up your defense mechanisms to face the danger of dying and meet it with full intensity. But how many people dance to the level of intensity they would have to fight for their lives, or eat ice cream and cake to that level of intensity? And because we have what's called a negative bias built into the human organism, which means the nervous system is oriented towards monitoring any threats to the system, because threats are what kill you. Happiness rarely kills you. So the point that I'm making to you is when you're angry, it has a much more important imprinting effect on the system, because the system's designed to remember threats. It doesn't have a need to remember things that are non-threatening.
Right. So if you go back to the 4, because we got down this wormhole by talking about the last 4 doctors you'll ever need, and we were talking about Dr. Happiness. So this kind of fits right back into the beginning of that conversation.
Yeah, so really what I was saying is the first thing I've got to do is identify what is it that you're willing to live for? What gets you excited? What gets you excited enough to wake up in the morning and say, yes, I get to go to therapy because Paul's helping me hit the golf ball further. I really want to improve my golf game. I love playing golf. Now, you may hate your job. You may not even enjoy your wife. But if you love playing golf, then now I have something that has therapeutic value, because that's when you come into a state of congruence with yourself. You're powered by love and inspiration, not I got to do it, or I wish I hadn't have done that, or, when she was beautiful when I met her, but she turned into a bridge troll after the first 2 kids, and now I have to survive her or him. So you see, I need something that brings your consciousness into alignment with your body, or mind, body, and soul need to come into alignment so that energy flows.
Yep.
So my philosophy is always tell them what they want to hear, but give them what they need. That's effective marketing. So if I'm dealing with an athlete or anybody, and I need them to do blood pressure cuff exercises to activate their inner unit, the inner abdominal wall, if the athlete can't figure out how these silly looking little blood pressure cuff exercises have anything to do with hitting a golf ball further, they're never going to do them, even if they pay thousands of dollars. I mean, I'm one of the most expensive guys you can go see.
Yep.
And people come and pay me lots of money. And if I don't make it clear to them why doing that's going to help them do what it is that their dream is, then they won't comply.
Yep.
So Dr. Happiness is all about what is it that inspires you to want to heal so you can do that more or do it better.
How do you get someone? I mean, that's a really, I don't know if I ever really figured that out. All the years I trained people and worked with people one-on-one, like how do you get someone to take seriously the blood, it's a great example, the blood pressure cuff, to activate the inner core when they want to hit the golf ball? Like, how does that connect? I'm not sure I see the connection between that and happiness.
Well, remember, their dream is to hit the golf ball further. That's when they're happy.
Yeah, but I don't get how, like, why would I think that the blood pressure cuff's going to make me hit the golf ball better?
That's why I have to tell them that. This is the point. Most people don't get
so that. So they're there to hear you and to hear you tell them, basically.
That's why I say, as a therapist, your job is to tell them what they want to hear, but give them what they need.
Right.
What they want to hear is that the blood pressure cuff is going to enhance their ability to hit the golf ball further. What they need is to activate their core system because they don't have any spinal stability. And if they keep lifting weights and swinging golf clubs, it's going to end their ability to play golf.
Right.
So I simply draw pictures on the board, and that's what How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy is. It's all the diagrams I made up for my patients.
Yep.
And I say, look, this is the muscles. This transverse abdominis, the deepest muscle of your abdominal wall, it's reflexively connected to the muscles of your pelvic floor and your diaphragm and all the muscles that run along your spine that stabilize each of the joints. If this muscle does not work, the transverse abdominis, then these muscles can't work properly because these muscles all work in interaction with each other. So they're kind of like rowers in a boat in a rowing competition. If one of them drops the oar, they're never going to beat the other teams, because if any of those rowers is in tune, they're going to outperform even 3 strong men racing against 4 little guys that are in tune will never outperform 4 little guys in tune. Okay, so what I'm showing them in simple, plain language is that this system of muscles acts to stabilize your spine so that you can handle generating the force and the explosiveness and the speed of rotation that it takes to hit a golf ball.
Right.
If you swing that golf club, which has a momentum and a lever arm that's very high, the forces you generate swinging a golf club are enough to destroy the ligaments, tear them, and to damage the discs unless those muscles are working. Because of the fact that you're laying on a blood pressure cuff, and I ask you draw your belly button in, and you now have a biofeedback system. If your belly button's doing what it should be doing, the pressure on the cuff reduces, so the brain can say, oh, there's the muscle. I finally realize I got it. So then I just do little demonstrations, like I will have them stand up, and I'll say, stand on one leg and hold your hand up. Now, push against me. And if their core's not working, they have no power at all. They'll just fall right over. Then I say to the men, now, lift your testicles, like, you draw your testicles up without picking them up, just suck them up.
Right.
Notice that when you do that, your belly button goes in. Oh, yes, look at that. Good. That's because those muscles are neurologically wired together. When one talks, the other ones behave as though they're in the same game. I say tighten your rectum. As soon as you tighten your rectum, your belly button comes in because the pelvic floor is neurologically wired to the abdominal wall because those muscles all have to create pressure to stabilize the spine inside. And I say to them, now, pull your testicles up and resist me. And lo and behold, they can generate 5 times as much force when all they did was turn on their transverse abdominis and the muscles connected to it.
Yep.
So they say the blood pressure cuff is designed to access that muscle that your brain has forgotten how to access. But because now you have a feedback device and you can feel the pressure of it on your stomach, your sensory system and your cognitive systems know how to access the muscle that's been shut down largely by pain or inflammation in your gut from things that you're eating that you shouldn't be eating. So when I say this exercise turns these muscles on, so the powerful muscles that swing the golf club can do it effectively without hurting you, and as long as there's no threat to the system, then you can get more force out of the muscles. The instant that there's pain generated by any movement, it shuts down the motor neuron pools, so you can't generate as much force. So what happens typically is someone, as they get a back injury or a shoulder injury, says, I used to be able to hit the ball 310 yards. Now I can only hit it 250 no matter how hard I try. That's because the motor units are being down-regulated to try to protect the system from self-destruction. So I tell them what they want to hear. Doing these exercises are going to improve your drive or whatever it is that you want to do, your ability to play with your kids, your ability to paint, your ability to do whatever. I give them what they need. I give them the exercises, the diet, and the lifestyle advice, and I explain exactly how it works with the physiology and the psychology so they can see the connection. Dr. Movement is all about movement, and it has 2 categories. Working out, which means spending more energy and resources per unit of time than you gain. So when you're working out, it's like spending money on a credit card. You have to pay it back or you go broke. Broke means sick or diseased or dead. Dr. Movement's work in component, which is a concept I developed, it means using exercise or movements coupled with breathing and shifts in consciousness that cultivate more energy per unit of time than it costs to do the exercise. So working out is like talking on a cell phone. It drains the battery. And when it gets to critically low levels, all the programs begin to collapse. Working in is like charging your cell phone. So you can use breathing and movement, such as Tai Chi, Qigong, various yoga techniques, and a variety of techniques that I show in my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, as zone exercises to actually charge the system up so it runs more harmonically, more efficiently, and you have more energy so all your biological systems are functioning at a higher level.
Would Kundalini Yoga fit into that? Different practices in Kundalini Yoga?
Yes, but depends on the rate of breathing, because some of those practices take you into quite a sympathetic state.
Right.
Depending on the blood-gas ratios being generated by how you're breathing, the timing of the breathing, the depth and the speed of the breathing. So a work in exercise, I characterize as an exercise that you can do without elevating heart rate, respiratory rate, without your tongue drying out, and you should be comfortable to do it on a full stomach, because when you do a work in exercise properly, it activates the parasympathetic system and aids digestion. So take the same question you just asked. Could you comfortably do all those Kundalini exercises on a full stomach? No, you'd probably vomit.
Yeah.
So a lot of them actually fall into the category of working out, which is one of the reasons you see lots of burned out yogis, just like you see burned out triathletes. Because they're trying to be a hero and conquer the world with yoga, which is exactly why Buddha gave up on yoga and said, look, 7 years of this, and it's just another addiction. How did he get enlightened? He gave up on all that stuff and sat under the bow tree and just let go and let God and just stopped trying to figure it all out. And all of a sudden, when he let go of everything, consciousness opened up and he became one with the universe.
So you've got Dr. Happy, you've got Dr. Movement.
Dr. Quiet.
Is that the sleep? Is that the one where
Dr. Quiet deals with sleep, but the masculine component of Dr. Quiet is working in because it uses physical movement.
Okay.
The feminine component is sleeping and resting, and there's active, passive, and total rest. So active rest is doing your activity such as running or lifting weights at a significantly reduced intensity, so it just becomes like a pumping activity, but does not detract from your ability to get a recovery to the point that when you go to the gym next time, you're tired because you did too much. And that psychologically, people in the West have a very hard time because they can't conceive how that's doing anything for them.
Right.
So I spend a lot of time educating athletes. Look, you have what are called biological oscillators. Your heart, your brain, and your solar plexus, all your guts, are actually in rhythmic oscillation patterns. And when you're working in and breathing in harmony with the movement, the brain waves, the heartbeat, and the waves of peristalsis all come into a phase lock relationship. So now you're like soldiers marching in step, or rowers rowing together, or dancers dancing in perfect harmony. So Dr. Movement's masculine component is the feminine component of Dr. Movement. And active rest can be done, but you have to get the athlete to slow down. For example, for active rest for a runner, your training runs have to be 2 minutes per mile slower than your most recent 10K pace. So if you just did a 10K a month ago and you ran 6 minutes a mile, to do Dr. Quiet's active component of active rest, you'd have to be jogging at 8 minutes a mile, because if you go faster than that, you're going to burn the system out. And when you go to do your hard training, you won't have any juice left and your body won't have recovered. Passive training means doing some other activity that uses different muscle groups and movement patterns other than the ones for your primary activity. So if you're a runner, then you could go swimming, for example. And that would have a therapeutic effect on you, and it doesn't use movement patterns and joint patterns and loading patterns that are the same as running. So, for example, I used to have boxers do a lot of shadow boxing in the swimming pool in neck-deep water because we were getting a lot of impact injuries from hitting heavy bags and bodies so much that it was wearing wrists and shoulder joints out and elbows. But when I put them in the water, which is, many, many times more dense than the air, but there's no impact loading, and the water actually decompresses the joints, and the movement of the water over the skin triggers the proprioceptive system, which actually has an inhibitory effect on pain impulses getting to the brain. So boxers that had beat up, tired bodies could get a great workout, and because the water's hydrostatic, it aids circulatory return. Their heart rates drop down about 10 beats per minute at the same perceived level of exertion. So they got the therapeutic effect of the water, its massaging effects, its enhance on circulation, decompression. So I could give them a very hard workout, but when they went to the gym to train the next day, they still felt like they had, in some sense, rested, but their physical level of conditioning was getting higher because I did not use a form of exercise that competed directly with their primary sport. That's why it's called passive exercise.
Right.
So active would be boxing at a low intensity. Passive is going in the swimming pool. Total rest is sleep, which our culture completely ignores as an essential therapeutic measure to achieve any dream or to stay healthy. And then you got doctor diet. So quiet diet, movement, and happiness. So basically all my training boils down to, look, you have to organize yourself so that what you know is your dream, why you're doing this, is supported by the right amount of movement, the right amount of rest, and introspection. Introspection or meditation is part of Dr. Quiet. And you know how to individualize your diet for your unique needs. There is no such thing as a diet that works for everybody. That's just the biggest can of crap I've ever seen. And people still trying to sell that crap. The vegans want everybody to be vegan. The vegetarians want everybody vegetarian. The meat eaters want everyone to eat meat. This is just like, to me, it's like it's so infantile. Sometimes I honestly look out at this and go, how do people like this get degrees and function in the world when they can't see the obvious? And all you got to do is read Nutrition and Physical Degeneration by Weston A. Price, and it shows you that beyond a shadow of a doubt. I mean, it's crystal clear, and there's many other documents of that and piles of research, which I've cited in all my training programs. So,
Paul, essence, do you still recommend people go down the metabolic typing route? I've kind of fallen out of that the loop with metabolic typing. Like, how do you recommend people navigate those waters these days?
Well, the metabolic typing in its core intention is excellent. The problem is, and I've talked to Bill Walcott at length about this because I have the same problem with my practitioners as he does with his. Everybody wants to follow a recipe card. People don't want to think for themselves.
Yeah, right.
They want to be told what to do. They don't want to actually have to work with each individual and identify what does that person need. So when people do metabolic typing, they get the protein type or the fast oxidizer type diet, and then they just eat off of it like it's the word of God, but they don't realize that your metabolic type can change throughout the day. If it's hot, if you got a bacterial infection or a dysbiosis, a fungal infection, a parasite infection, if you're doing heavy weightlifting versus walking and yoga, or light exercise. I mean, the number of things that shift what your body's needs are, from toxins in the environment to psychological stress. I mean, the list is long. So what happened was I probably was the one that put more people in Bill Walcott's program than anybody because I made it part of the Chek Institute program, but I saw they kept falling in love with the recipe cards, and people would then fail with my practitioners, and even advanced metabolic typing practitioners find me. And lo and behold, they'd find they weren't doing what I taught them to do, or what it says right in the book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy. There's a tachometer diagram that says if you're getting these symptoms, it indicates too much fat or protein, do this. If you're getting these symptoms, it's too much carbohydrate, do this to balance yourself. I've had people study with me for 4 years and still not even use that one diagram, which is right in front of them, because they just want to be told what to do. So the answer is, I created my own system of metabolic typing that's not based on anything other than paying attention to the symptoms that your body's giving you, using muscle testing. And then I teach people how to connect to the consciousness within them, which is technically called the soul. And so you have 3 levels of interaction. What are you eating every day? What are you drinking every day? And what's going on in your life? Record that on a daily basis in a daytimer program or a phone. Record what you eat, what you drink, what spices you used, and then track your symptoms and write down exactly what happens to you when you get it. And then after about 7 to 10 days, you can start seeing a pattern. For example, every time someone eats eggs, they get tired, they get a headache, and they have cognitive problems. So once you start seeing that reoccurring pattern, then you use my 4-day rotation plan. I say, now you take the eggs out for 3 months. And on the next cycle, where on egg day, or bird day, if you take the eggs out, but you still have the symptom, it means it wasn't the eggs, or it was 2 things. So if you ate eggs and broccoli and lettuce the first time that you got the headache, you now have taken the eggs out, so you now have to remove the broccoli or the other item, and I always tell them, remove the one you eat the most of, because that's when the immune system's most likely to be sensitized. So that's called an elimination diet, which is actually still the gold standard, because even the lab tests today are not that accurate. I've done double blood draws testing lots of them, and there was no correlation. So I took my blood in 2 sets of vials, put a fake name on it, and compared the lab results from the one labeled Paul Chek and the one labeled Jim Smith, even though they were the same blood, and there was no correlation whatsoever.
Wow.
So having done this, I realized the only way to do this effectively, and it's important for people to do because they got to take responsibility for learning their body. Like, they know everything about their iPhone, but they don't know how their own body works. So by using soul connection, which is more than we can talk about here, muscle testing, and diet logging, a person learns exactly by monitoring themselves day by day. For example, when I do deadlifts, if I do a good deadlift training session, like German volume training, where I do 100 reps at 75% 1RM in one workout, 10 sets of 10 on a 1-minute rest period, I'll be hungry for 2 days and I will have a huge increase in my need for flesh food. So I'll be a radical protein type. But on days that I'm resting, like if I take 2 days off, I can fast or eat as a vegetarian and feel perfectly fine. And everyone I've ever worked with, and that's thousands of people, turn out to have exactly these kinds of responses. But on the same token, if a person's going through a divorce or they've just lost a job or someone died in their family, the psychological stress can cause significant shifts. And one person, the wife, finds herself needing a lot more flesh food, maybe fish and the fatty acids from fish that are anti-inflammatory. But the other, her husband, finds himself needing to eat as a vegetarian for the same psychological stressor, but because of metabolic individual differences. So the point I'm making is, after years and years of testing with thousands of people and training thousands of students, I found there is no way you can escape the responsibility of getting to know your body. So my primal pattern eating webinar is chunked out of HLC2 training so that the public can go learn that stuff. It's right at Chek Institute, C.H.E.K Institute.com. Shop whichever country you're coming from. So if you're in the United States, shop US. Then at the bottom of the menu, webinars, and it's one of the webinars. So I would highly recommend for yourself.
Yeah, no, I just want to say how important I think this is. You know, I run a challenge. I don't know if you know much about the business that I run called the Whole Life Challenge, but you know, we have dietary parameters. It's a game. We've gamified health and well-being. We put it together with 7 daily habits, and people go in and they score themselves each day for doing very small bits and pieces of what would be considered healthy habits over the course of your day. Yeah. And one of the areas, because we've gamified it, we had to come up with rules. And so the nutrition, we have 3 different nutrition levels. It's mostly based on eating whole foods, like eating whole, healthy, organic, you know, fruits, vegetables, meats, nuts, seeds, oils. Yeah, I'm losing a few in there. Maybe some starches. First step. Right. So
if you don't get that right, you can metabolically type yourself accurately, but if you're eating low quality food, you'll still be a sick person.
Yeah. So you know, we get people hopefully to get started down this path, but anybody that's been doing this for a while or has an interest in taking themselves to the next level, you just can't generically put yourself into a list of foods and say this is the way that's going to work. I mean, you're giving me even more like it's going to change from day to day, even from hour to hour. It can
change minute to minute.
Yeah, right.
It literally can. I mean, yesterday I was stacking rocks in my rock garden, and I was about to put the top rock on about 10 feet up in the air, and I was having to stack a rock on top of another rock to climb up. I mean, this is dangerous stuff, and I do it because I'm an ex-paratrooper, motocross racer, and I like to be challenged, and it's extremely challenging physically. I'm picking up very heavy rocks and putting them up over my head and stacking them with no bonding agent. Mm-hmm. So they're sculptures, great big sculptures. And I was just moving one of the rocks so I could put a second step rock to get to the very top, and I accidentally bumped the stack. and about a 40-pound rock fell off the top, and I just happened to see the shadow out of the corner of my eye, something flying, and I reflexively moved, and one of them hit my thigh and gave me a bit of a contusion, and the other one caught the edge of my heel and ripped half my heel right off. Like right now, my shoe's full of blood just because it's leaking through the Band-Aid.
Yikes.
But the point I'm making is that amount of physical stress and the shock of that can radically shift your dietary needs instantly. Right? So for example, that's going to produce a lot of inflammation and trauma. Mm-hmm. So if a person's used to eating a lot of beef or a lot of red meat and they keep doing that, that's going to increase the likelihood that they're going to have too much inflammation in the body and actually slow the healing. And so there's an example of an event. You come home from work and your wife announces that she doesn't want to be with you anymore and she's leaving. That'll shift your metabolic effects for a year.
Right.
And the one thing I wanted to throw in before we run out of time is, so my system's broken down into these 4 key categories of Dr. Diet, Dr. Quiet, Dr. Movement, and Dr. Happiness. Those are the foundations of health. If you remove any one of those, you cannot be a healthy person. Simply cannot be. There's no possible way. If you're an expert at exercise and you are doing what you love to do and you know how to eat, but you don't get enough sleep, you're in trouble. If you're sleeping well and you're dreaming well and you're moving well, but you're not eating well, you're in trouble. And listen, I've coached the best athletes in the world and been a therapist to the best athletes in the world and the best sports teams in the world, from the All Blacks to the best baseball teams, hockey teams, you name it. The list is long. I've worked with hundreds of them, and I can assure you, you cannot get away with ignorance in any one of those 4 categories. They are the foundation of health. Within my system, there are 6 foundation principles that have to be considered as essential to those 4 doctors. 3 of them are masculine, 3 of them are feminine. Nutrition, hydration, and sleep are the 3 feminine principles. Breathing, thinking, and movement are the masculine principles. So in my holistic lifestyle coach training program, you learn to analyze nutrition, hydration, sleep, breathing, thinking, and movement as a means of orchestrating the activities that will bring about balance through quiet diet, movement, and happiness. So the answer to the question, which we got a bit sidetracked with, sorry for being complex with morphogenic fields and stuff, but look, you're talking to a guy that knows how stuff works. So
that's fascinating to me.
I don't want to make it so simple it's not true. I just want to tell it how it works.
Quick reminder, everyone. We want to grow the podcast. We want to bring bigger, better, more influential, more knowledgeable guests onto the show. And the only way we can do that is if we grow the show. And the best way for us to grow the show is, guess what? Through you guys. We live and breathe based on word of mouth and your reviews in iTunes. So if you love this episode, or if you thought of something in this episode that one of your friends could really benefit from, please send them a link to the show. Tell them to download it. It's very, very simple. You can also go to Apple Podcasts and leave a review. The easy link to do that with is bit.ly/Andy Petronic Podcast. And you can leave a review. Hopefully it's 5-star. Hopefully it's a big thumbs up, and you can write something, because that really, really helps too. And I really appreciate it. And the world appreciates it, because it gets out to more and more people. And the stuff we have on this podcast is too good not to share with the rest of the world. All right. Thanks for the moment, and let's get back to the show.
So really, my system now, it takes 7 years for a person on average to complete my training. But ultimately, at the end of the day, everything they're doing is learning to effectively assess nutrition, hydration, sleep, breathing, thinking, and movement, so they can write a therapeutically effective program that the patient agrees upon based on 5 program design factors: time, energy, willingness, finances, and resource availability. So you can design the best program in the world, but if it does not meet their time commitment ability, or their resources ability, or their finances ability, or their energy, or their willingness.
It doesn't matter.
It won't matter. It's just a bunch of wasted paper. And it took me years of writing the best programs in the world that nobody would do to figure out. So I started saying, why am I writing these programs that I know are scientifically correct, but people aren't doing them? So I started saying, what's causing you not to be able to? Well, I don't have time. It takes too long. I don't have the equipment at home, so I have to drive to the gym, and that increases the amount of time it takes, and I can't get it to fit in. I don't have the energy to do a program that long. Even though it's a good program, I just don't have the energy. I'm just too tired. So there's energy. So time, energy, finances, do they have the resources? And do they have the willingness? I found a lot of people just didn't have the willingness, which means I didn't qualify their dream effectively. Yeah. If they don't have the willingness to do it, it usually means they're doing it because somebody else is telling them they have to do it, but not because they want to do it. That never works.
Paul, I want to reiterate something that you said, just kind of encapsulate what you said. And that is, I think we, as a culture, we're addicted to wanting to do more of what we're either already good at or what's the shiny object bouncing in front of our face. The sexy things, like I want a 6-pack, I want bigger biceps, I want to be able to run a 10K. And if you truly want better health and you want to transform your well-being, if one of these areas, if one of these 6 areas is missing from your life, you have no business focusing on something else that is shiny and cool before you address what you need to address to bring those things more into balance.
Well, we have a few problems that are related to that. One, ignorance is not bliss. If you don't realize, like, we still have a culture that doesn't think that food is anything but energy. Therefore, they shop for cheap food. I mean, I've had professional athletes tell me they can't afford to buy organic food, but they're making $4 million a year. And I'm like, I just saw you pull into my driveway in a $160,000 Porsche Carrera R4 that's basically a race car on the street. And I said, do you put Mexican gas in that or do you put premium? Oh, of course, premium. Well, good. So you're driving a $160,000 car that you put the best gasoline. You're telling me you can't afford to buy organic food. You better eat your car then. Right. Because that's basically the kind of silliness. So my point is, being ignorant does not help. And most people in our culture are not educated. They've been told what to think, not how to think. And most of their education has been bought and paid for.
Well, it's also in front of them on the television. We've got a whole
program. That's what it means to be programmed. Yeah. So the other thing is we have lost our elders. Our culture does not have the kind of tribal structure that we used to have, where the elders were the wise people that guided us and knew the myths of our tribe. They knew how to engage the mysteries of life, and they knew what the trials of life were. And we do not have a rite of passage anymore. Yep. We used to have to go through a rite of passage to become a man or a woman, and men had to face very painful and challenging rites of passages, so they knew how to look death in the eye to protect the tribe, and they knew what was worth fighting for and what was not worth fighting for. And women went through rites of passages to prepare them to become a mother and to go through the challenge of birth. Well, today we got women that take drugs so they don't have to feel the pain. They hire nannies and they use Game Boys and drugs to babysit their kids because they don't want to be involved. The kid's now more like a dog or a toy that you have. We don't have any wise elders. We have a huge percentage of our population still going to churches where they're programmed to believe that God will burn them in hell if they sin, and all this kind of infantile, disempowering belief systems, which largely create diseases in people. In fact, of all the people that I've seen with cancer of the sex organs, probably 95% of them have been people from raised Catholics, because they have so much guilt and shame about their sex life that they manifest cancer, because what you think is what you produce. Right. And so we've lost our rite of passage. We've lost our wise elders. Now our wise elders are grandpa and grandma are getting boob jobs, trying to look as good as their daughters and their granddaughters, and the men are trying to have big biceps and drive Corvettes and keep up with the young guys. And so instead of being the wise elder, they're acting like they're their son's brothers and competing for women. Basically what I'm saying is psychologically our culture is unfortunately still very childish and very infantile. So when people come to me in therapy, it's often because they're going through a crisis where the soul is saying, look, you have to become an adult now. You're going to die one day. And if you don't move forward in your psychological growth and development, you're going to reach the point in life where life has no meaning to you. You're just going to have done nothing but consumed a pile of food and a pile of medical drugs. And the plastic that you've used for boobs is going to poison your system, and your Swedish penis enlarger is giving you the impression that you're actually a stud, but you're really not a man yet because you can't face up to the responsibilities of life and you can't handle. Look, if your body, I'm almost 57. I'm still in damn good shape. I can still outrun and outlift most of the elite athletes I work with to their shock. But I've noticed that my body doesn't respond nearly like it used to 20 years ago, and I have to be much more conscious about how I train. I have to be more scientific about it. I don't see as good as I used to. I wear glasses. I never dreamed I'd be needing glasses. Mm-hmm. But as I've aged, I've really enjoyed it because it's put me in a situation where I can't rely on just youthful power and strength. And it makes it important to learn to love. It makes it important to see how important relationships are and how important it is to work in harmony with other people instead of just dominating by force and power and this kind of masculine machismo drive. Women in our culture, as soon as their boobs start falling and their butt starts to falling, they feel like they're dying because their whole set of conscious orientation is to their power, where a man thinks of how much he can lift, how fast he can run, how high he can jump, and how big his biceps are. When he loses that, he loses his sense of self if he doesn't grow spiritually. When a woman loses her beauty, she loses her pulling power. So they go into a crisis of self. But if they haven't learned to share their wisdom and they haven't learned to see that what's inside of them is more important than what's outside of them, because what's inside of you is what goes with you through the death canal. Yep. As I say, the only thing you can take with you in life when you go is what you've become. You can't take your body. You can't take your bank account. You can't take your favorite clothes. Even Jesus says in the Bible, a rich man can no sooner get to heaven than a camel can get through the eye of a needle, meaning you can't buy spiritual development. You can only do it through conscious growth and development. In all tribal systems, they had medicine men, they had shaman, they had ceremonial rites. They used sacramental medicines and psychedelics to open up the psyche to get past the ego so you didn't lose your connection to nature and to the earth. We've lost all that. Now it's all about how big is your this, how fast is your car, where do you live, how pretty are you?
So, Paul, is there hope?
Well, of course there's hope because...
Sounds pretty bleak.
Well, the thing is all you got to do is look at the rates of disease and suicide. We have the highest rates of suicide in all categories, children, adults, and old people than we've ever had. We have the highest rate of diseases we've ever had, but we got more doctors, scientists, therapists, and trainers than we've ever had in the history of man, which clearly is an indication that science is not taking us into ourselves. Yep. It's taking us into more supplements and more objects and more things to purchase and more ways to take shortcuts, right? The whole field of biohacking could be completely avoided if you just mastered 4 doctors and 6 foundation principles and actually paid attention. Instead of buying a gadget to tell you if you're tired, pay attention. Instead of buying a gadget to tell you when your blood sugar's low, pay attention. Instead of buying a gadget to tell you how many calories you've burned, just feed your body when it's hungry and feed it what it needs. I mean, for me as a therapist, watching this, it's just like, it's almost like, let's just say that scientific materialism is about to destroy the planet. Is there hope? Yeah, there's hope, because pain is a great teacher. And you find out that with all your gadgets and all your pills and all your shortcuts and all your plastic surgery, you cannot avoid the truth. You can't avoid the challenge of growing up, or you just die unprepared and you become an ineffective example for the rest of our culture. And at some point, the system will start to collapse, and the people that are in tune, such as Chek trained professionals, and the people that are more close to the earth, and in the Bible it says the meek shall inherit the earth. Well, lo and behold, this is what's happening. Mm-hmm. It's the people that haven't lost their sense of common sense, who haven't overinvested in glitter, smoke, and mirrors, who haven't made money their biggest priority, but made living their biggest priority. And that's why I say, if you've got a dream, even if you don't make a lot of money, if you're doing what you love to do every day, you're making love all day. Right. If you're working for money, you're just making for money. And even the Beatles warned us a long time ago, money can't buy you love.
That's probably a good one to end on. No more singing from either of us.
Yeah, well, the thing is, my closing comment is, look, we are the universe. There's nothing about you that didn't come from everywhere in the universe. You look at yourself in the mirror and think you're you, and I look at myself in the mirror and think I'm me. But you're turning over 2 million red blood cells a second. You're turning your skin cells over every 3 days. You're turning your bone cells over about every 3 weeks. You're turning every single cell in a human body over every year. So you're really like a river of incoming earth, water, fire, air, and space. You're in space. You need to eat things from the earth. If there was no sun, fire, there would be no photosynthesis. There'd be nothing to eat. You're made of water. You're 70% water when you're born. Every biochemical reaction in your body is water dependent, and you're drinking water all the time. So when you realize those elements are not only of the earth, but everything that's in the earth came from other stars. And when astrophysicists look and say, okay, where did the elements in our sun come from? They find out that they came from every other star in the universe. So we're actually, paradoxically, everything here was made by the whole universe. So you were saying, it sounds awful bleak. We are living out a universal drama. But within the drama, we each play a role, and we all have the free will to co-create with the universe. And that's what it means to be a wise person. That's what it means to be an adult, is to wake up one day and say, I get it. What I choose has a direct impact on my life and other people's lives because I'm co-creating with them. Mm-hmm. You come home angry, and your family cannot avoid that experience. You're co-creating with them. Mm-hmm. If you take good care of yourself so you can play with your kids as they grow, you're co-creating with your kids. But if you're sick and you're on your couch all the time, then dad never got to participate, and it has an impact on how they grow up. We are all co-creators. And we've just got to reach the point where we take responsibility for the fact that the earth is a garden, and we must garden the garden instead of destroying the garden, because we're at a dangerously close level to an environmental collapse. Yep. Entomologists have shown that bug traffic worldwide has dropped 75% in the last 50 years. That's the sex organs of this planet. Rudolf Steiner said human life depends on 2 things, bees and trees. And when either reaches a critical level, human life will cease to exist as we know it. We are almost killing off the entire bee population worldwide, and we're wiping out the entire rainforest and the tree populations, and the earth's overheating. I can go on a long list. But all of these things are opportunities that are producing pain that ultimately enhance consciousness. The question is, will we smarten up and get our priorities right and say, look, living is more important than making money. Supporting the world and supporting the children and supporting nature is more important than having a cool car or the latest cell phone. And if the stuff that we're doing that gives us a sense of social rank and esteem is destroying the fabric of life, then we have to recreate our myth. We've got to come up with a story that allows us to feel good about watering the plants and the trees and protecting the animals, and having less has got to become cool instead of taking more out of the earth. But behind all that, we're in a cosmic play. And our ancients knew that for time immemorial. But we've gotten trapped in all these kind of materialistic and shall we say, fundamentalistic religious perspectives without realizing, as Shankara says, no man can understand Scripture until he's enlightened. And when he's enlightened, he doesn't need Scripture. And as I say to a lot of my patients who are caught in all these religious silliness, which one of your pastors or teachers in church was an enlightened human being? So far, not one of them has said that they knew of any enlightened people in any of their churches. So it means we've got people that don't understand what they're reading, but interpret it in ways that leave people with a lot of guilt, shame, and stress that they have to medicate. And when we're medicating ourselves with exercise, alcohol, drugs, toys, games that are distracting us from what's really important in life, then you end up with a lot of diseases that nobody can fix because they're trying to fix a problem you're creating as a stress reaction to not living a life you want to live. But if we get back to spending more time looking at the stars at night and hugging each other and singing together and realizing that the color of our skin doesn't mean a damn thing. We're all the same on the inside. We're all made of the same stuff, and we're all creatures of the earth, and we're all creatures of the universe. And we start celebrating life with each other and celebrating our differences as unique and colorful, just like an artist makes a painting with many colors of paint, not just one. When we realize that we are the world and we need the world, and we start loving and caring for the world and making it and each other important instead of possession and power, we'll turn a corner. But we're at a tipping point right now where if we don't get past all the dick swinging and how big's your bench press and how much money did you make last year, we're going to bring ourselves to a crisis point that will wake us all up.
And gravity and physics and life will teach us. It's just going to be the way it is.
That's why they're called laws.
Right. Paul, thank you so much for everything that you do, for your contribution you've made over the last 30 years of, who you are and who you are in the world and the difference you're making. Because you are really making a difference. And I'm grateful personally, and I know a lot of other people are as well.
Well, thank you. And you're helping me make a difference. And see, what we're doing right now is we're co-creating together. Right. We are sharing what's important. You're using your abilities and your connection with people that have gained a lot from you to share a voice, and I'm sharing the best I have. And when we hold hands and do that, instead of having these agendas to convert people to getting vaccinations or religious convictions or selling people stuff that they don't need just because we want to make a living and who cares whether they can afford the car or not. When we get past ethics and start being moral together, an ethic is a code of conduct that may or may not be life affirmative, but a moral is a code of conduct that's life affirmative. So when we realize we all need to become moral together, we have to pay attention to what is life affirmative and protect it. Then we will start using our militaries to police the soils and police the waterways and police the airways to keep them life affirmative instead of destroying each other. But it's only when people like us actually share the importance of this stuff and bring it up into consciousness and say, hey, we're in this together.
It's like the end of the Dr. Seuss tale, The Lorax. Unless.
Yes. And all we got to do is just read Dr. Seuss. We'll be fine. Throw the other shit on the fire. It doesn't help. I'm serious.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
I'm serious. I mean, look, I'm a guy with a 9th grade education that lectures at the highest level of professional organizations all over the world, and I have to tell them this stuff. And when I'm hired to work with, the Kobe Bryants and the superstars of the world, and I find out they're not drinking any water, they're not going to bed, they're not pooping, and they're not eating real food, and they got so-called the best doctors and therapists money can buy, the doctors and therapists go, I can't believe that really has anything to do with it. I said, well, watch this. And lo and behold, I prove it over and over again.
Yeah.
And so here we are. We are back to the Lorax. We are back to Dr. Seuss. And if we just need to Dr. Seuss together and throw out all the stuff that isn't working, but is just unfortunately making a lot of people richer without any concern for the ramifications of it.
Well, I could probably sit and come up with questions that will last us 3 or 4 days, because every topic you brought up opened up another wormhole of areas of questions I have. I mean, I have all these questions I wrote down that I've never got to. But maybe we'll do it again down the road. Cause,
anytime. Just, touch base with Penny. Look, I love to share what's important with the world, because I spent my life looking into what stops people from living well, feeling well, and performing well. And after 32 years of intensive study and work on myself and traveling the world, I pretty much know what's going on with people very quickly. And if you look at humanity as though each person was a cell in a larger organism, well, it's easy for me to see what's going on there too, because it's the same thing, right? You're a collection of cells, and so are the people of the world, and so are all the animals and creatures of the world. Yeah. So if you poison food with pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, and rodenticides and can't figure out why you got cancer, well, you're not very smart. And if it's poisoning you, then think of what it's doing to nature. And when we get our food and our water out of these places and we're not paying attention to the fact that we're eating the stuff that kills things out there, well, this is my point. You don't need to be a genius. You just got to pay attention.
Connect the dots.
So, connect the dots, and don't wait for a doctor to tell you got a disease from being silly and not using your common sense. And that's my way of saying, look, I'm happy to talk to you and people like you, because we really need to fill the airways with this. I mean, when you consider Coca-Cola has about a $350 million a year marketing budget to sell poison.
We've got a long way to go.
We got a long way to go to catch up with even one company.
Yeah.
So let's do it.
Let's do it. I'm on board. Let's do it. Can I ask you a quick question about water?
Yeah.
I recently got an RO filter for water. Should I be adding? I usually add Himalayan pink salt or to it, or Celtic sea salt. Should I just be remineralizing like a dropper full of it, or I make a slurry?
Just go by feel. Pay attention to how your body feels. There's the best thing to do though is use pH strips and just test it.
Oh.
You want to get the pH to about between 7.5 to 8.
Okay.
And almost all reverse osmosis filtration systems acidify the water, which facilitates inflammation in the body and makes you tired.
I just want to make sure all the shit's out of it. So
well, you can do that, but unfortunately, you're also taking a lot of the good stuff out of the water.
Right.
So.
And Celtic or Himalayan will put it back in, or that's not enough?
I would also check in with your body and just see for example, wet your finger, stick it in a little Celtic sea salt, and say, how does that make me feel right now? Then clear your palate with some water and try that with Himalayan sea salt. Have 4 or 5. The best salts to use now, though, are the salts that are mined out of the earth, not ocean salts, because the nuclear fallout from all the nuclear stuff, the meltdowns that we've had, has made a lot of the sea salts are holding too much radiation. So real salt is a good one. Himalayan sea salt's a good one.
Okay.
But if you just get a few high quality salts, and your body will, because each of them will have a different mineral profile.
You don't mean even putting it in your mouth. You just mean putting it on your finger and.
No, I mean put some on your tongue.
Put it on your tongue. Okay.
Yeah, stick it in the salt. So you got a little salt.
Yep.
Taste it. See how your body reacts. Then try the other one. One of them is going to make you feel the best.
Okay.
That's what I mean by learning to have a relationship with your body and let it inform you.
Right.
So you might, I got 50 different kinds of salt here, literally. And I rotate I check if my body wants salt, I just ask my soul, which one of these do I need? And it changes regularly depending on all the environmental factors.
Yeah, right. Okay, great. And, thank you. I'll give that a shot.
Yeah, and then just check the pH, and
okay.
Then you can see how much salt does it take to bring the water to 7.5 to 8 pH.
Oh, okay.
And that lets you know when it's optimally alkalized for your body.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
If it tastes too salty and it's the right alkalinity, it means you're going to have to replace your water filtration system because it's stripping too much out of the water.
Ah. Or just get some delivered, just buy spring water.
Yeah. Where did you say you live?
LA. Yeah,
I'm not sure who there, but you might want to see Palomar. We use Palomar mountain water, which is right out the window.
Oh, wow.
It's 4,000-foot artesian well. It's been tested in one of the few waters in the world that have absolutely no impurities, and they deliver it in 5-gallon glass bottles.
Wow.
So just check out Palomar Mountain Water. I'm pretty sure they have a distribution in LA.
Okay, I will. All right, thanks again.
You too. Take care.
Take care. Hey, it's Andy, and thanks so much for listening. If you want to know more about what I'm learning each month, head over to andypetronic.com and subscribe to my monthly newsletter. If you were touched, moved, or inspired by anything you heard today, chances are someone else you know would be too. Please take a moment to think about who and send them a link to this episode. And if you're super stoked, please head over to iTunes to write a review. The best way to keep current on guests and episodes is to subscribe so that the latest one will automatically get delivered straight to your phone. The apps I use for this are Apple Podcasts, Overcast, or Pocket Casts. The Andy Petronic Podcast is produced by our team, Winslow Jenkins, Becca Borowski, and Ernie Hurtado. Big thanks to Nikki Grudadaria for the artwork. You can find all of our episodes, links, and complete show notes at wholelifechallenge.com/podcast. I'm Andy Petronic. Thanks for listening.